America went to war with itself, brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor, in a conflict that would decide the fate of freedom itself. It began as a fight over states' rights, but became a battle for the soul of a nation. The war that ended slavery and reshaped the United States forever. The year was 1861. The United States, a nation built on the promise of liberty and equality, was on the brink of destruction. For decades, North and South had been drifting apart, divided by economy, ideology, and most of all, by the question of slavery. When shots rang out at Fort Sumter in April 1861, the country plunged into a brutal four-year conflict that would claim more American lives than all previous wars combined. This is the story of the American Civil War, a war that redefined freedom, tested democracy, and determined the fate of a nation. Long before the first cannon fired, the roots of the conflict stretched deep into America's past. Slavery had existed since the colonial era, but as the young United States grew, its contradictions grew clearer. The northern states were rapidly industrializing, factories, railroads, and immigrant labor driving their economy. The southern states, in contrast, remained rural and dependent on agriculture, cotton, tobacco, and sugar sustained by the forced labor of nearly 4 million enslaved African Americans. This economic divide became a political and moral fault line. The question was simple: would new states entering the Union be slave or free? But the consequences were immense. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 tried to keep balance by admitting Missouri as a slave state and Maine as a free state. For a time it worked, but every new territory reignited the debate. By the 1850s, the issue could no longer be contained. The Compromise of 1850 attempted to calm tensions, but the Fugitive Slave Act, which forced citizens to assist in capturing escaped enslaved people, angered Northerners and strengthened abolitionist movements. In 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act allowed settlers to decide for themselves whether to allow slavery, leading to violent clashes known as Bleeding Kansas. Abolitionists and pro-slavery settlers fought in bloody skirmishes that previewed the war to come. The Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision of 1857 only deepened the divide, ruling that enslaved people were property, not citizens, and that Congress had no right to ban slavery in the territories. To the North, it was an outrage. To the South, a vindication. In this atmosphere of turmoil, one man rose to national prominence: Abraham Lincoln. A lawyer from Illinois and member of the new Republican Party, Lincoln opposed the spread of slavery into new territories. When he won the presidential election of 1860, it was the final straw for the South. Convinced that their way of life and their right to own slaves was under attack, 7 southern states seceded from the Union even before Lincoln took office. They formed the Confederate States of America, with Jefferson Davis as president and Richmond, Virginia, as its capital. Lincoln, sworn in on March 4, 1861, made it clear secession was illegal. A house divided against itself cannot stand. He had warned years earlier, and now that prophecy had come true. Tensions boiled until they finally erupted in April 1861 at Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. Confederate forces demanded the Union garrison surrender. When they refused, Confederate cannons opened fire. The Union troops eventually yielded, and Lincoln responded by calling for 75,000 volunteers to suppress the rebellion. The nation was officially at war. In response, from more states, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas joined the Confederacy. The United States was now split, 23 Union states against 11 Confederate states. Both sides believed the conflict would be short, perhaps lasting only a few months. Neither could imagine it would stretch for 4 long, bloody years. The North had clear advantages: a larger population, more factories, more railroads, and greater wealth. The South, however, had experienced military leadership, a defensive war, and the motivation to fight for what it saw as its independence. The first major battle came in July 1861, near Manassas, Virginia, known as the Battle of Bull Run. Civilians even came to watch the spectacle, expecting a quick Union victory. But when Confederate reinforcements arrived under General Thomas "Stonewall" Jackson, the tide turned. The Union Army fled in chaos. The illusion of a short war vanished. The Confederate victory boosted Southern confidence, while the North realized it faced a long and costly struggle. Lincoln called for 500,000 more soldiers. The war soon spread across multiple fronts. In the West, Union General Ulysses S. Grant achieved early successes, capturing Forts Henry and Donelson in Tennessee. These victories opened the way into the Confederate heartland and gave the Union control over key rivers. But at Shiloh, in April 1862, Grant's army faced a surprise Confederate attack. After 2 days of fierce fighting, the Union prevailed, but at a terrible cost: more than 23,000 casualties. The sheer scale of death shocked the nation. In the East, Union General George McClellan launched the Peninsula Campaign to capture Richmond. Though he came close, McClellan's cautious nature allowed Confederate General Robert E. Lee to outmaneuver him. That summer, Lee scored stunning victories in the 7 Days battles, saving Richmond and earning a reputation as the South's greatest commander. Then came the Battle of Antietam in September 1862, fought in Maryland. It became the bloodiest single day in American history, with over 22,000 casualties. Though tactically indecisive, Lee's invasion of the North was halted, giving Lincoln the opportunity he needed to issue one of the most consequential documents in U.S. history: the Emancipation Proclamation. On January 1, 1863, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring all enslaved people in Confederate-held territory to be forever free. The proclamation didn't immediately free every enslaved person. It only applied to areas in rebellion, not to border states loyal to the Union. But it transformed the war's purpose. It was now a fight not just to preserve the Union, but to end slavery itself. It also opened the door for African Americans to serve in the Union Army. Nearly 180,000 black soldiers and sailors would eventually fight for the Union cause, many earning medals of honor for their courage. Internationally, the proclamation discouraged Britain and France from recognizing the Confederacy, as few European nations wanted to appear to support slavery. The year 1863 became the turning point of the war. In the West, Grant's siege of Vicksburg, Mississippi, after months of fighting, finally succeeded on July 4, 1863, giving the Union complete control of the Mississippi River and splitting the Confederacy in two. At the same time, Lee launched another invasion of the North, leading to the Battle of Gettysburg in Pennsylvania. For 3 days, July 1st to 3rd, the two armies clashed in one of the largest and deadliest battles ever fought in the Western Hemisphere. Lee's final assault, Pickett's charge, failed disastrously, forcing him to retreat to Virginia. The South would never again go on the offensive. 4 months later, President Lincoln stood on that battlefield and delivered the Gettysburg Address, a 272-word speech that redefined the meaning of the war: that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. It became one of the most famous speeches in American history. In 1864, Lincoln promoted Ulysses S. Grant to command all Union armies. Grant's strategy was simple but ruthless: attack everywhere and never let the Confederates recover. He coordinated a two-front campaign. While he battled Lee's army in Virginia, General William Tecumseh Sherman advanced through Georgia. Sherman's march to the sea from Atlanta to Savannah destroyed railroads, factories, and crops. A campaign of total war meant to break the South's ability and will to continue fighting. In the East, Grant's forces engaged Lee in a series of bloody battles: the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, and Cold Harbor, suffering terrible losses but steadily tightening the noose around Richmond. The war had become a test of endurance, and the Confederacy was running out of men, supplies, and hope. By early 1865, the Confederate capital of Richmond was under siege. Civilians starved, rail lines were destroyed, and morale had collapsed. On April 2nd, 1865, Richmond fell to Union forces. Just 1 week later, on April 9th, General Robert E. Lee surrendered his army of Northern Virginia to Ulysses South Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. Grant offered generous terms. Confederate soldiers could return home, keep their horses, and would not be prosecuted for treason. The war was effectively over, but tragedy struck just days later. On April 14, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer, while attending a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. Lincoln did not live to see the full peace he had fought for. The nation mourned deeply. The Civil War left the United States physically and emotionally shattered. Over 620,000 Americans were dead, soldiers from both North and South. Cities lay in ruins, families were torn apart, and an entire region faced devastation. But out of the ashes rose a new birth of freedom. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment granted citizenship to all people born in the United States, including former slaves. The 15th Amendment guaranteed the right to vote regardless of race. The years that followed, known as Reconstruction, were filled with hope and hardship. Freedmen sought education, land, and rights, while Southern states resisted the new social order. Though racial inequality persisted for generations, the Civil War marked a turning point in human rights and in the definition of American democracy. The American Civil War was more than a battle between North and South. It was a struggle for the nation's soul, a fight to decide whether freedom truly meant freedom for all. 4 years of war transformed the United States forever. The Union was preserved, slavery was abolished, and the idea of liberty was reborn. But the scars it left, on land, on hearts, and on history, remain to this day. The war that divided a nation also made it whole again. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to like, share, and comment down below. It would be appreciated. See ya!